Hi everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar on coping with change in the creative industries, brought to you by Thrive, Skiddle and Music Support as part of Male Mental Health Week. I'm joined by our esteemed panel of peers and experts who will introduce themselves in just 1 second, and I'm confident it's going to be an educational, edifying and inspirational conversation as they share their knowledge and experience with us, and also look at some practical coping skills and mechanisms. Welcome to the panel, and welcome also to our participants out there behind the screens. Thank you for joining us. If you're going through a difficult time and feeling rough, you're in the right place, and hopefully we can keep you company for the next hour or so, and you might pick up some helpful information and tools to cope. We're going to explore a number of topics in the context of the pandemic, and also from a male perspective, because it's Male Mental Health Week, and apparently we as men are statistically a lot less likely to ask for help with mental health issues. I just want to be clear though about inclusivity, that just because it's an all-male panel, the webinar is totally open to everybody. Everybody's welcome. We welcome and encourage you, and please ask questions, post stuff in the chat, etc. You're all more than welcome. The context of the pandemic is fairly obvious, but just to give it to some perspective, according to UK Music's most recent report, the UK music industry is set to halve in size by the end of the year, going from a value of £5.8 billion to £3 billion due to the COVID-19 restrictions. And this is obviously going to have big ramifications on those working in the music industry. It's hard to see a light tunnel with all of this going on. There is obviously going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Nobody really knows what that looks like at the moment. And so we want to discuss how to cope with change and how to navigate through these difficult times, looking after our mental health, being proactive and focusing on the things that we can control rather than the things that we can't control. And specifically, we're going to look at feelings of being left behind, being unable to move on, acceptance and being able to deal with the here and now, workaholism and what happens to workaholics when they haven't got any work, and the effect of significant change in life. My name is Matt Thomas. I'm one of the founders of Music Support. Music Support is a charity now approaching 5 years old that provides help and support for individuals in any area of the UK music industry affected by mental health issues such as addiction, depression, anxiety, or a myriad of other mental health issues. And for more information about what we do, please see www.musicsupport.org. I'm a person in long-term recovery from addiction and mental health issues. I'm also a veteran of the music industry, having worked first in major record labels, then in artist management, up until about 7 years ago when I decided to shake things up a bit, and I began working more around the world of recovery with people struggling with addiction and their mental health. And so, as well as founding and being chair of Music Support, I'm currently a marketing and communications consultant to another charity called Action on Addiction. And I also work with music industry clients as an advocate, mediator, and facilitator. So that's more than enough about me. We're now going to meet the rest of our panelists. So I'm just going to go around in clockwise on my screen. And over to you, Jaysol. Would you like to take a few minutes to introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, guys. My name is Jaysol. I'm a UK award-winning singer-songwriter. My journey and my story is I grew up singing and playing the drums in church. So I guess you can say I'm quite spiritual. I've always kind of had that background, and that's, I guess, where my musical journey really, really started. And then I went to the Brit School, studied musical theatre. So I actually went down the theatre route for quite a while and doing backing dancing for various different artists as well. And then I went into my own lane, which is, being myself, but I give myself an alter ego, which is Jaysol. It allows me to kind of switch up and kind of differentiate from the two. So when I kind of want to be myself and when I want to kind of be in the kind of artist mode. So that's a bit about me as well. I write a lot for various artists. I was also signed with Sony ATV for a little while. And I've started to produce for various different artists as well. And I've learned a lot of new skills actually during the last few months, which I'm going to kind of delve into a bit later on. But I think that's a bit about me.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Max Golfar, hello.
Hello. So, hi guys. My name's Max and I work as the events and music manager for Hootananny Brixton. And I am also a working DJ and freelance promoter. So as part of my work, I spend a lot of my time curating lineups and putting on events, of course, which has been very challenging this year and not quite so simple. And as a DJ, most of my work has dried up, like for most artists, apart from, you know, some social distance gigs, which have happened in the latter half of the year. But, you know, I was meant to be doing 14 festivals this summer. None of those happened in the end, sadly. And from, you know, 5 events a week at our venue, including events we were doing at other venues and my own freelance gigs, 95% of that has all disappeared. But yeah, basically, I'm a promoter, programmer, and DJ. That's me. Thank
you very much. Next in the circle is Alastair Coomes. Hello, Alastair.
Hi there. Hi. Yeah, so I'm Alastair Coomes. I'm a psychotherapist. I work in central London and work in a school as well, a couple of days a week. I am not an award-winning singer, although I did try. About 20 years ago, I was a signed artist with Beggars Banquet, but we failed to trouble the scorers, as it were. And when my kids came along, my wife, who works in the theatre industry and entertainment as a choreographer, turned around to me and said, "What are you going to do? Because you don't earn any money." And I'm going to stop dancing now. So I became a teacher for a bit, and now I've retrained as a psychotherapist. A lot of my clients are men, and my doctoral thesis is on men and suicide and how they experience therapy.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, Simon J from Thrive. Hey, Simon, how you doing?
Hello, Matt. Yeah, no, thank you all for having me. My name's Simon J. I'm the commercial director at Thrive. Thrive is an app that supports 3.5 million people around the world to prevent mental health conditions, basically. I have a passion for the music industry. When I was much younger, I was in a band. I'm not going to say the name of the band because then everyone can Google it, but we used to support quite a few acts that are big now, Bring Me the Horizon and that sort of scene. And it all ended one day, but I thought that was my future. That's how I was earning money at that age. And so that sparked a 2-year downward spiral for me, which ended in quite a severe period of depression. So yeah, I come at this with a lot of personal drive, I guess.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. And thank you, everybody. You're all very, very welcome. Let's dive straight into our discussion. I was reading this morning, actually, and I came across a quote by Leonard Bernstein. So I'm going to be incredibly pretentious and just quote Leonard Bernstein, who said, "I believe that man's noblest endowment is his capacity to change." And I thought that, coming from a great musician and composer, was quite appropriate for today as well. Although obviously by man, I think he meant mankind as opposed to men. But, you know, we are going through a time of change, and we are going through a time when being able to change and effectively roll with the punches, as it were, and be resilient is hugely, hugely important. On that topic, the music industry is driven by passion. And to that end, a lot of us who work in the music industry feel like the industry is our identity. And by having the music industry at risk, and therefore livelihoods within the music industry at risk, we are in danger of feeling that a part of ourselves, a part of our identity, has been taken from us. And I can certainly relate to that as someone when a long time ago now, I was made redundant from my job in the music industry. And I thought that my identity had been erased with one fell swoop. And it took me a while to come to terms with that. So let's just discuss that a bit at the moment in the context of what's going on. And I think it would be a good place to start, perhaps with a bit of a clinical overview from Alastair about identity.
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to give you a bit of a personal one here. My wife, who works in the theatre, had a bunch of West End shows racked up and ballets and what have you, and that disappeared overnight. And although she's found some other employment, which is great, she is going through a massive period of grief about that. And that what you were talking about, that passion and that identity, there is, I think it's really important to recognize that these changes, that it's quite, we can kind of say, let's be resilient, or let's be, change is an opportunity. And I think if we don't go through a bit of a period of grief with it, I think we miss something. And identity, yeah. I mean, music is an enormous part of my identity, and what music I listen to. And you can judge somebody who they are by the songs they like and the bands they like, and to then suddenly have all of that taken away from you literally overnight is yeah, I think is a lot of, is a really grief, a grieving thing, a deep cut. And I think we need to hold each other in that vein.
What would you say to a client who was in the grieving process of maybe not having a job in this industry anymore, or certainly for a period of time? How would you enable them to cope with that?
Well, nothing lasts forever. Music has always survived. People always want music. And I was listening to something on Six Music yesterday, actually, about, all this, about, musicians have always struggled. It's always been a struggle since the 1950s, with record labels and things like that, and people not getting the kind of royalties and things like that. So it's kind of nothing new in a way. Musicians are used to a struggle. And actually, in a way, I think really great art comes out of struggle. And there is a way of using that to fuel your creativity and fuel your anger, or your frustration can be a very, very positive energy and form of creation.
So find creative outlets to help deal with the emotions that you're experiencing.
I use a lot of writing. In terms of practical things, I get people to write a lot. That's personally something I like, or to draw or paint or take photographs.
And be aware that you're experiencing grief, and allow yourself to feel that. J-Soul, you very publicly experienced grief when you gave your very moving audition on the X Factor, which I was watching today. And how do you feel that the grieving process that is currently going on in the music industry, which is something that I was very moved by your performance. I lost my mother last year, and I took a lot of comfort in the words and the emotion that you're expressing, and the other people's reaction. How do you feel about the fact that what the music industry might be going through at the moment is a similar process of grieving?
Definitely is, and it's very interesting to hear what Alastair just kind of said, because I remember, if I go back to the X Factor experience, when I performed the song I wrote and I dedicated it to my mum, I remember writing that song for her on the night of her funeral. And I've never experienced, that was my first time ever experiencing grief, it was like I didn't know what to do. I was feeling so many feelings. Like one day I was like, it's fine, I'm fine. People were looking at me like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Like, it's fine. And then the next day would just hit me, you know, like a ton of bricks. And I've never experienced anything like that before. But I remember when I got kicked off the X Factor, it felt like a grief. I was grieving, like, and it was so weird because I remember being like, this feels just as bad as losing my mum, because and a lot of people won't understand it that aren't in the business, but music to people like us that love it, it is like my child. You know, that when someone listens to my music, if they don't like it, it's kind of like you're saying you don't like my baby, you know, because I have a connection to everything I produce. Because a lot of times, 99% of the times, I write about real stuff that mean a lot to me. And then other times will be about friends or things that I've seen. But a lot of the stuff I write is very personal to me, and the whole music experience is very personal to me. So when I got kicked off, it was another sense of grieving, and how I kind of look into this kind of thing, because it's hard, because I have a lot of friends that do various different things, whether they're accountants or, you know, they work in real estate or whatever it could be. But it's like all of them all still get to do what they love to do and go to work every day. Fair enough, the surroundings is different, but the majority of us don't get to do it. And it feels so unfair. And it feels like I kind of feel like I don't have a purpose, if that makes any sense. I felt like since this whole pandemic thing, I feel like I feel out of place. I feel like a fish out of a tank. I don't really know what to do. And it's made me question, like, wow, I've trained my whole life to do this. And for the first time, I'm like, there's not really much I can do with it. You know, and I know that's not true, because there is things you can do with it. But I think for a lot of people, that is our thought process, because the stuff that, apart from creating, because obviously you can create in very different, you know, everywhere, but in terms of the execution and again, like, this is work for a lot of us, you know, this is actually how we monetize and live and pay our bills. Like, it's really hard. It's been super hard to capitalize off that. So it does feel like a grief. And when you see little things and adverts saying, I don't know, Emily's a ballet dancer, but she could be working in Tesco, those kind of things, like, oh my God, you might as well just punch me in the face because it is one of the biggest offenses I've ever seen in my entire life. And I try to not give it any of my energy because I've really been monitoring things that I'm giving my energy over the last couple of months. I started doing yoga and I started meditating, and I noticed that giving things your energy allows it to change your whole mood and your perspective and your whole day. And I don't want to tap into that. But I think I've kind of come off what we've been talking, but I say that to say it has from someone that has, you know, been grieving the loss of someone very close to me. And I know a lot of people have unfortunately been able to join that grieving club this year. But in terms of obviously, you know, being in terms of the music scene and the music industry, it definitely is for a lot of us. It has been a sense of grief because this is the way we express ourselves, and we've been able to express ourselves for coming up to a year now, and that's crazy. You know, this is what we're going to do.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really poignant, and very much appreciated your honesty and openness. And I picked up a couple of things in there in particular about avoiding toxicity, which is something that I had to develop quite early on in the pandemic, and I had to stop watching the news and stop my obsession with my Twitter feed. And you know, and I've heard you doing that, and we'll come back with Alastair and Simon to some other coping mechanisms. I just wanted to quickly to call on Max, because I think I might have noticed another coping mechanism with you, which is probably quite prevalent. But you were laughing when you told us that you'd had 14 festival bookings over the summer that had been cancelled. And I'm just wondering if you really did think that was funny, or if that is a kind of a coping mechanism that we as men are very, very good at putting out, bearing in mind that this is Male Mental Health Week and we're not very good at dealing with our true emotions.
I feel it was more of a sarcastic laugh, if anything, regarding about losing gigs. Of course, I'm not happy about that. I mean, it's hard to really express exactly how, how it feels. There's obviously a lot of feelings of disappointment, but I feel I'm at a stage now where I've accepted it, and I feel with not just those gigs, but with being primarily a promoter, the shows I was going to be putting on, and I've got to the point where I feel there's no sense banging our head against the wall, and we just have to make best with the situation. Sure, we aren't getting to do the things that we'd all necessarily like to be doing, but we're talking about grieving. I feel for the beginning part of this year, I was definitely in what I suppose you could call a grieving process, and sort of not, touching on what you mentioned about identity, sort of feeling a loss of identity and feeling like this is such a big part of what I feel defines myself, and to have that sort of stripped away was very difficult to take, and you feel a loss of purpose. But I think I'm at the stage now where I'm just trying to get on with it the best that I can, and trying to see the positives that I can take from the situation. And one of the things I've been trying to tell myself is that in some ways it almost gives an opportunity to create in new ways, and it has created a level playing field, which perhaps wasn't there before, which in some ways is a disadvantage with certain projects and certain goals, but with other projects and ideas, it can be an advantage as well. But yeah, no, I mean, regarding the laughing, I suppose perhaps it is a coping mechanism of sort, but I don't know. I wasn't thinking about it quite that deep.
That's okay. I'm not. I'm only teasing. But thank you for that answer. That was really helpful as well. And I think taking what I really got out of that was adapting and taking the positives out of it. And music support in March. Music support, we lost about half to 3/4 of our funding in one fell swoop, because obviously our funding comes from the music industry. And we had to seriously adapt and became very creative. And one of the things that came out of that was our relationship with Thrive, that we never would have dreamed of probably a year before. So I think being able to be creative and adapt is all part of resilience. And so speaking about Thrive, let's bring Simon in to sort of, to share your experiences, both as someone in a band and as somebody who's worked with music support to develop something that is really helping a lot of people out there.
Yeah, no, of course. I think one thing that Jay Soul touched on that I thought was spot on was about the purpose side of it, because that's something I really felt was when my experience of the band sort of ended for no real good reason, I completely lost all purpose in what I was going to do. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, and that's what sent me on that downward spiral. I felt useless, and it really took me a long while to accept that. And I think going back to the grief comes in all forms and shapes. It's not just about losing someone or bereavement. It's talking about postnatal depression earlier on today. If a mother has a baby who's been a career worker, and the baby comes, it's great, there's a baby here, but actually, is there a purpose anymore for that, that lady? And that's something I was dealing with today. But grief comes in all forms of ways, and I think accepting it and being aware of it is hugely important. Going through the motions with it and not just thinking, I'm going to put it to the back of my mind and crack on with other things and, forget about it. We have to be aware of it, and we have to take those thoughts on. But then I think, as everyone touched on as well, we can maybe seek passion and enjoyment through other ways, perhaps. I know a lot of people, we work in the football industry, a lot of players who end up being let go from their clubs and things like that. Again, they lose their purpose, they lose their identity completely. Mm-hmm. But they can then focus their time and energy in something that they find enjoyment on. Not Tesco, as Jay Soul said. It's not about retraining into something completely stupid, but it's about working on another passion that you might have, or using your passion in a slightly different way so that you still get enjoyment from it, basically. And yeah, I mean, within the Thrive app, we've been ever so pleased with the work we've done with music support. It's an NHS approved app. It's got hundreds of hours of content like meditation and deep muscle relaxation and cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's all things we can learn while we are well. It's about how we can learn skills to deal with grief and deal with anything that could come any of our ways, you know. It's not just about anxiety and depression. It's about looking at ways that we can, yeah, as I say, build our resilience and become more aware of how we're feeling and react to it quickly, I guess.
Thank you. That's really handy. And I think if anybody's interested in downloading the Thrive app, go to the Music Support website. It's free to download for members of the music industry. And talking about members of the music industry, we've got good representation here. A word on crew, because often the crew are overlooked when people tend to focus on the artists or the labels or the promoters, and the crew are the most likely people to end up without the money in their pocket from what is their industry, their trade, their day-to-day manual trade. It's a lot harder to say to a crew member, well, it's okay because you can just go out there and be creative, when actually being creative isn't necessarily going to pay the mortgage. And there are some very, very real problems that people are facing out there. And so I think crew have been going through a really, really difficult time. It's not an easy job at best of times, given the life on the road that we were talking about before. So a word about crew, and does anybody have any experience directly with members of crew that they've been associated with, and any words of advice, and if not advice, at least comfort for crew members out there who might be watching?
I suppose that the one thing that occurred to me, you know, it is in terms of talking about men as well, and you know, men tend to make up more crew than most things. We tend to be quite inflexible sometimes and try and think ourselves out of a problem, and we'll use that strategy to think ourselves out and fix it. And from a kind of male point of view, I suppose trying to develop some sort of flexibility and trying not to overthink things, I think, is really, really important. You know, and of course, you know, go talk to someone would obviously be one of those things. But we are, I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, I think sometimes we're a little bit criticized for being thinkers and doers as opposed to having that emotional side, although I don't think it's quite that simple, and I wouldn't want to be you know, be so polarizing with that argument. But I think we do think a lot, and we need to try and stop. And so, like Jason was saying, and the meditation is a really, really good idea of doing that. And taking a bit of exercise is a really good way of doing that, even if it's a little thing. The first thing, if you go see your doctor and you're depressed, the first thing they'll do is tell you to take more exercise, because it has the same effect that any drug they'll give you. And I think and build a bit of routine into things.
The sad truth is that on this call, we can't really help people who are experiencing financial problems with their practical financial issues, but we can help them with other coping mechanisms, which I'm hearing an awful lot. And actually, we've had a message through from Debbie Taylor, who's a female touring production coordinator, taking care of a 99% male crew. What can Debbie do to undertake to help her 99% male crew when they get back on the road? Please, God, might that happen quickly?
There's one thing from me, I'd say, which it doesn't help the immediate situation, unfortunately, but and I'll always harp on about this, Matt, I have done to you several times. cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, sounds like quite a therapeutic, complicated clinical thing. Not that I'm going to go on about the Thrive app. I mean, it's free, so I'm not trying to sell it to anyone, but there's a CBT program built into our app that's very short. It's 26 sessions, but they're all very small bite-sized sessions. And learning the process behind CBT, which is the connection between our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions, and being able to understand that from our own level is a bit of a life hack, really, in how you're able to understand your own emotions and then behave in certain ways. And so I've seen in some very, very strong results from people, even friends that I've recommended that technique to, who might feel a bit down or a bit, struggling in certain ways. And just by understanding that and unlocking that thought process in your head can help you really reassess what's going on in your head. And everything might not be the worst case scenario. And actually there are positive things you can look at. And it's a really powerful thing. So I think CBT is a big thing, not just while you're unwell, but while we all are well, to keep us well. That's a big thing.
I like the expression life hack. That's really handy. And I think in a lot of cases, it's all about how it's presented as well. I think if given the option between CBT therapy and a life hack on your phone, I think I know what sounds the most attractive to some people. While we're on this topic, I'm just going to jump a little bit about what other support options are there out there that anybody can recommend. And I'm talking about things like Andy's Man Club and the Campaign for Living Miserably and such. Does anybody have experience of useful men's resources out there?
I belong to a thing called Man Speak, which run an awful lot of both open and closed groups, and it's a pay as a volunteer basis. So you can pay nothing, or a $5 or a 10 or 15, and it's basically a bunch of guys sitting around having a chat. And they also run a women's group as well, which I think is great. And I was a little bit skeptical to start with, because I was thinking, maybe they're not proper trained people or anything like that. But I found it incredibly supportive and really uplifting and holding in times of the stress I've had over the past 6 months.
Fabulous. So man speak or woman speak, presumably.
Man speak, and there's woman speak, but it's I think I Google it. A guy called Kenny runs it. Kenny DeCruz, I think his name is. So that's
brilliant. Thank you, Debbie. I hope that's helpful. And please come back in if you've got any other questions, or contact music support. We're going to jump back. I'm aware that we're going to lose J-Soul due to a pre-existing commitment in a few minutes. And I just wanted to come back and give you a few words. The new head of UK music, Jamie Njoku Godwin, has said that the pandemic has dealt a catastrophic blow to the tens of thousands out of the almost 200,000 people who work in the music industry at risk of losing their jobs. So the question here is, how do we continue? So how do you continue to get out of bed in the morning, confronted with this seemingly Herculean task of continuing? How do we find hope? Because there is hope. How do we reach for that hope? And embrace it and enact it in our day-to-day lives?
Is that to me?
That's to you.
I don't think there's one answer to that. I think, like, for me, I look at everything as an opportunity to inspire. And I sometimes just imagine, imagine if we're all in a movie and someone's just watching us, and they're just looking at how we deal with certain things. And I am quite a resilient individual. Sometimes things do overwhelm me, and I found myself just stuck in bed, and I'm overwhelmed, and I'm like, I just can't do it. But then I have to tap into that little Stephen is my real name, that little Stephen that had dreams, that wanted to be a singer, that wanted to perform in, or whatever the dreams were. And I asked myself, what would he do? And I have to kind of look in myself at my younger self and find that energy that my younger self had, because my younger self had so much hope, so much dreams, and the sky was the limit for them. You know, COVID was nothing. Anything that came in the way was nothing. And I try and become that, embody that person. And with that, and with other things, I just learning new skills for me and just using it as, I'm a creative. We're all creative. I'm a writer. It's crazy, but in 20 years time, my kids are going to be like, what's COVID-19?
Yep.
You know, they're going to be like, what is that?
Yep.
And I think as long as the sun comes up, you have another chance. It's not the end of the world. And that's kind of been my coping mechanism, is that as long as the sun comes up, it's not the end. And that's how I look at everything. And that's my answer. I don't really know how to answer that, but that's kind of what works for me. And
that's wonderful. You've answered it perfectly. You've answered it very, very beautifully. Thank you. And, you know, I'm old enough to remember when cassette recording at home was going to ruin the music industry, you know, and then CD piracy was going to ruin the music industry. And then the internet was going to ruin the music industry. And obviously all of those things had profound effects on the music industry, but the music industry changed. And I think it's really important for all of us to remember that.
I think there's something here that I've wanted to say, that the one thing I wanted to say before, you know, joining tonight, is that musicians are the most adaptable people in the world, really. They've had to adapt. They're writing new stuff. Different bands, different place. They're in one town, then the next town. They go from job to job. They are the most adaptable people. In a way, there are a lot of skills out there that people have in the music industry that play, you know, that really play to the strengths of this in a way.
100%. And, you know, and Max, someone like you as well, who's kind of multi-portfolioed, as it were, you're a really good example of that, and moving from one thing to another and finding the next solution.
Well, I think right now you know, as I said, it's really important to be adaptable. But I think, you know, what's interesting about the conversation we've been having, I feel like there's a lot of focus on the musicians and the artists, and it's really important that we remember, and for the people listening on this conversation, that the music industry is so much more than just the performers on stage. It's the promoters, it's the bar staff at the music venues, it's the security. It's the door staff. It's the people in the promotions team. I mean, the bar managers. I mean, there's so many. The agents, the roadies. I could go on for ages, and it's for, you know. I think actually it's something quite important for me to mention. Sound engineers and light engineers. You know, those sort of people who haven't got necessarily the most obvious route back to sort of being creative, like whereas a musician might be able to go home and work on a song or something, although I'm not saying that that's always easy during these difficult times, but, you know, I feel there's a lot of people who are in this very challenging position, who perhaps don't have full-time employment, are freelance workers, and you know, are really struggling to remain creative and are struggling to adapt to the situation. And I think there isn't, you know, as Jay Soul was saying, there isn't one answer, and it's difficult to say what the solutions are for people without coming across as patronizing, because everyone's in a very different position, and you know, what one venue or one artist or one promoter might be facing can be completely different to the next. And it's a very challenging time. And I suppose the only thing I can confidently say is that it's just important to make sure that the people around us, that we're supporting them how we can, whether that is by trying to involve them in our own creative projects, or if that is just by simply giving them a phone call and, you know, making sure that we're there for them.
Yeah.
Communication is key. But there is no simple answer to this. We, you know, in a weird way, even though we've all been pushed apart this year by everything that's been going on, I feel it has brought our industry together in a way that I personally haven't seen before. And I suppose there's something quite beautiful in that, you know, the way people have come together to rally and fight for our industry and what we believe in. But yeah, I guess my answer to that is just trying to be there for the people around us in our local communities. Sometimes just the person next to us is, you know, can make a big difference in a wider space.
That's remarkable. Thank you for saying all of that, and completely 100% echo what you say, and the importance of everybody in the industry. Music support is there for everybody at all levels of the industry, and so is the Thrive app. And I think what you've said rounds off our conversation really nicely. There's so much more that I would have liked to have gone to, but it's such an engaging conversation. Maybe we can come together again for a part 2, because this is so interesting and so important. And just to round up, I mean, I've been taking a few notes, and I've heard the importance of flexibility, of not overthinking, of meditation, of avoiding toxicity, avoiding the news, avoiding social media, of trying to work on having acceptance, of creativity, of communicating with our community, of letting in the grieving process and allowing the grieving process to take place appropriately, looking at the positives of our situations, to talk to each other, to exercise, to try and utilize routine in our day, to take regular walks. And as long as the sun comes up, we're in with a chance. And let's remember that this pandemic has not only caused a lot of issues and a lot of problems for a lot of people, but it's also helped to bring us together as a community. And let's not forget that. So I think on that note, we could probably close this conversation for now, but let's try and make a commitment to come back together again for another one, because I've really enjoyed this. And I hope that you at home have benefited as well. And if you need help, please do get in touch with us at Music Support. Visit the website, www.musicsupport.org. Any last words from anyone?
Just to give a little bit of a shout out to the Men Speak. If you go to the Meetup website and put men speak, you can find them there, and there's tons and tons and tons of support there.
Okay, I think we've lost Jay Sol now. He's gone back to his other engagement. But Max, Alastair, and Simon, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for hopefully bringing some hope to a bit of a dark night out there. And take good care, and let's all see each other in a music venue very, very soon.